Welcome to the Natural Genius podcast. We're here to help you tap into your natural genius. Let's go. Get ready to meet the powerhouse that is Corinne. She's one of those people that's been able to take her influence and her clever, grounded way of getting a lot of progress in the financial system to help a lot of people through social impact finance. She's great fun, loves being outdoors, and we haven't seen each other for a long time, so this is a really great chance to reconnect. She is an impressive person to know. Enjoy hearing Corinne. Corinne, welcome to the Natural Genius podcast.
Oh, it's been such an honour to be here, Sam.
And before we hit record, we started talking about your role because I was catching up with you after a while of not having seen you, and you were saying that you're now working with Trust for Nature, and through the pandemic you had a bit of a soul search and worked out what you wanted to do next after great financial social impact work. And now you're doing that work. So tell me, you said that you're a long shot for the role you're doing now, and you're having a ball 3 years later.
So my first love was always nature. I've always been into nature and the outdoors. And at university, I studied environmental science and did a master's in environmental science as well as a Bachelor of Commerce. So, but I'd got so used to doing my nature stuff in my private time. And after the pandemic, and, I was looking for a role and I was thinking things through, and this role came up as CEO of Trust for Nature. And I did think I was a long shot because I hadn't worked in nature for a long time. I'd worked in climate, but that had also been a long time because I'd spent so much time working on financial exclusion and economic empowerment. So, but I was fortunate enough to get the gig, and I'm 3.5 years in, and I'm so happy. I reckon I have the best job in the world. I get
all
to
the
go
power to you. Tell me more.
So Trust for Nature is one of Victoria's oldest conservation organisations, and we work with private landholders who wish to conserve their properties either forever with a conservation covenant, or the Land for Wildlife program, which many people will know is a lime green triangle which you put on your fence and indicate that you are passionate about nature and you're creating a wildlife habitat. So that's, apart from actually seeing beautiful places, what inspires me the most is the people who are drawn to nature and who take the time to care for it and think about forever are just really amazing people. And I get to hang out with them. And I think that's it's just a joy I get every day.
Corinne, I am absolutely delighted to hear that for you.
And I think what's clear for me now, and I can only speak for Victoria, is they come in all shades of people. And I think part of that is it provides a lot of hope for the future because climate change is here and we are seeing nature change. But I've got people we work with who are 95 and thinking about future generations. I've got young people, couples, singles, every shade of politics, farmers, but they're people who love their land or who are just thinking about the betterment of both the plants and the animals. So it's just nice to come across people who are that vested into things outside of themselves.
Oh, and hanging with great people is a nice experience, and in beautiful surroundings.
Totally agree.
And I was deliberately outside for this conversation with no blurring of the background, and I've just realised why, because the friends whose property I'm on right now, they've got a covenant on their land as well. So we're looking at a property that doesn't have fences and is being restored. So how fun that's come into our conversation.
Go
and so yeah, go there exactly. And they tell me about people around this area. So this is Violet Town, a couple of hours north of Melbourne, and I really love being on different people's properties around here and the work that they're doing to conserve them. Tell me, I want to wind back the clock a little bit, because when last you and I were face to face, you were doing work around financial empowerment, and the person you are in my mind, and with a lot of these conversations, I'm like, I wish I'd caught up with that person more regularly. The person you are in my mind is having created lots of great ripple effects in the financial social impact world. Tell me, when you reflect on that part of your career, what are you most proud of, and do you still get notes of those ripple effects?
Yes, I do. And the time I spent working on financial inclusion was really important, and I was even invited last week as part of International Women's Day to a session around women and the importance of financial empowerment in particular, given the vulnerability that many women face because of money. And I think building products that are both inclusive financially, but also give people the tools to find a future themselves is really important. So I can see that you can't, when I go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've got to look after yourself, and that security is a primary piece. And before you can even think about nature, even though we're interrelated, and part of it is we've got to take some of the crisis out for people. And that work was really, impactful. And I speak to people who have both taken the loans or who are working through those programs still, because they're still in existence. And one of the Good Money stores, which is in Collingwood in Melbourne, when I drive by it, I have a small smile.
I haven't seen you for ages. Yeah, I haven't seen you for ages, and I do the same when I go past there, because I think of you every single time.
So, but it's also really nice that those programs survive beyond the individual, and that was always part of the intent, that no one person should hold a program. So allowing microfinance in Australia to thrive, I was only a small cog in that wheel that is continuing, and unfortunately the need for those products hasn't stopped. And that's, I think, and we're seeing probably more and more need for it now, as there is greater pressure on housing and inflation, making, the day-to-day for people on lower incomes incredibly challenging.
Oh, Corinne, a dear friend, Lisa Gamboni, who I've done a podcast episode with, is on my mind as you're talking, because she did commerce and psychology. So she does really great stuff in the people space, and she talks about how she's the psychologist and the economist. And I love for you that you're talking about sustainability and finance, or the economist aspect as well. Such a great complementary set of skills that you studied, and then you've taken forth into possibly two sort of, decades or a couple of decades of your career.
That's right.
Heading to the green. So tell me more about life now, and tell me about some of the programs or the initiatives that you're doing, and what you're proud of in that space.
So I think what I've been really proud of is, like all businesses, Trust for Nature had been around for over 50 years, and we have done quite a lot of work around transformation and preparing ourselves for the 21st century, looking at AI, looking at leveraging technology more broadly, looking at a lot of the various spatial data sets and so forth. And how do you build a high-performing team leveraging these tools whilst maintaining that relational piece, which I think is the magic, because it's those human interactions with landholders that kind of is the glue of the business. So bringing a business mindset to what the organisation has been really critical, and working with the team to do that. And some of it has been, helping a lot of the scientists have conversations about money and learning around how do you read the profit and loss, and why is revenue important for impact, and they're, I think, discussions that are not always that comfortable in some of these sectors, but if we don't bust those myths, we can't, I think, continue the work. And so a lot of the work I developed and skills I developed in that financial exclusion work, I've been able to bring on around how do you build. If we're going to be a business for forever, we have to build it like a business for forever.
Oh, sounds like you're the most perfect person for the job. I mean, how lovely. And do you think that was part of the thinking in the decision makers around bringing you on?
I suspect so. I suspect they, I've been able to leverage a lot of my marketing skills, the brand work I've done, and that kind of financial piece. And I'm surrounded by a whole bunch of really capable scientists and ecologists. So there's no lack of technical, but bringing that, I think that business acumen helps, shape the business. So, and sometimes you just have to be in the right place at the right time.
Oh, beautifully said. And tell me some of the applications of technology that you're part of and how you might, what your criteria might be in terms of what you take on.
Yeah, we're working through that at the moment. But just looking at workflows and how people spend their time. And I think, AI has turned up very quickly in our worlds, all of us. For many, it will have been there for a long time, but for a lot of us, it's, the last 12 months have just been quite full on. And how do you leverage these tools for good? And that's partially what we're working through at the moment. So we're doing, our back infrastructure, but really thinking through where is our time best spent, and can you automate some of these processes so that the technical skills are used better than just doing paperwork.
Yeah, wow. And also doing tests, I guess, to see what works and what you think is going to be robust.
And some stuff works and some stuff doesn't. So it's, I think, just putting the rigor around it to have a shot. Without necessarily, I'm also a fan and having, because in between doing as part of my financial exclusion work, I helped build a technology platform, and through that I learnt the importance of not customising.
Oh, that's a very good thing to learn.
Yep. Build the processes around, don't customise the tech.
It's such an important topic right now, Corinne, because of vibe coding and because of so many different technology solutions that can be tailored right now. Tell me more.
And I think it's really that people can change, but you can build systems that are way too technical if you're not careful. And so really understanding, having clarity on what you're trying to achieve when you're looking at processes, and then really sticking to that, getting those pieces right before you start adding, the icing on the cake. There's a lot of efficiencies in just getting the basics right.
Gosh, how interesting. So when you're working with leaders around you and even doing mentoring from time to time, Corinne, what are the things that reappear that you teach other people?
I think trust your gut sometimes. And I personally, I find it really important to have some creative space, and to do that, you've got to get away from the emails and the day-to-day piece. So create enough space that you can actually think through options, and sometimes getting to the right decision can take time, but give yourself time to work it through. So I think that's one of the things I see, because I can see some people just rushing to a decision. Sometimes a slower journey can get you to a better decision. I also suggest to people to don't get into the groupthink, get different opinions around the table. It's not always very comfortable, but you can get a better answer too. And learn to live with that discomfort sometimes.
Oh, I hear you. Tell me more, because you would know. I mean, I think that the person that you are and the success you've had with small to medium businesses within, or organisations within, sometimes bigger structures, you would know how to build an entity. So what other things? Because, I mean, you're across so many different aspects as a leader. So you'd be across people and finance and systems and marketing, as you just referred to. So what else comes to mind as good tips that you think that have given you a good way to chart your course?
Hire really capable people. Sometimes less is more, but make sure they're really good, because then let them do their work. Subject matter experts, just let them do it. I work with an incredible fundraising and communications team. I just need to understand what they're doing, but they can do it themselves. And I think there's some real magic in watching people grow into that. But I've also seen leaders hold the reins too tight. So tight when you need to, but also if people can do their jobs, let them go.
And Corinne, do you think that you were like that in your 20s?
Oh, no.
Do you think you might have been holding the reins too tight? Or I don't think my question was clear.
So I think over time I think as you become more experienced, you become more comfortable with letting things go as well. So I think that is it's something that comes with time, which is, I think, one of the gifts of time and experience. Probably when I was younger, I was probably rushing a bit hard, probably a bit too ambitious, and probably didn't let people grow enough. But I also made, you learn from your mistakes in those things.
Oh, and we have to grow through them. Annie Faulkner, who I did an episode with recently, I met her through change management in Australia, where she was presenting at a change event that I went to. And she was a really senior change manager in Australia, and then went on to move to Berlin, and she's been doing change programs across Europe. And more recently, she coaches very senior leaders and boards and things like that. And she was talking very eloquently around the ambiguity and the adaptability and letting go. So it's lovely that this same thread's coming through in this discussion, Corinne, because similarly, you've seen a lot of great leaders and developed your own leadership over time. And that letting go, as you say, gets more comfortable.
But I also think, and I reflected upon it the other day, if you, as a leader, you get it wrong sometimes. You're rushing, you're across a whole lot of things, and just taking the time when you reflect upon that and just apologising and saying, I got it wrong, I'm only human, goes a long way for people who are working with you. Because I think sometimes there's an assumption as a leader that you have all the solutions and that you get it right all the time. So to show that human vulnerability, I think just allows the relationships to deepen. And there was two people, I'd had the communication in my head, but clearly I hadn't voiced it to them. So when I made a decision, they weren't quite at the stage that I thought they were at. And so I then reached out to both of them independently and said, look, I'm really sorry. This is where my thinking was at, and I probably should have engaged you a bit earlier. And it just went a long way, because both of them, one of them said, yeah, I was a bit grumpy about that. And the other one said, oh, no problems. I could see you were stretched. But it creates a much better dialogue. and I think an insight as to how you lead and your style. And I think that's really important, because leaders are only as strong as the team that surrounds them and works with them. And I think showing that vulnerabilities is something that probably didn't happen when I first started my career. I remember working in professional services with a partner who was very staunchly, I will always be the partner, and very straight-faced and, very strict, whilst, was dealing with a terminal illness. But we never saw that as part of their personality. And I often think of her and the journey she must have gone on, because it would have been hugely isolating, because that was just not what she brought to work. And I think the workplace has slid a bit more into bringing your whole self to work. And I think that was probably a real upside of the pandemic, where we have blended personal and work-related duties a bit more. And I think that strengthens leaders. I think it also makes it less lonely as a leader, because, you can open up a bit more and share around how you're operating or your decisioning.
Oh, that's so beautifully said. I reflect on when I was a line manager years and years ago, and the loneliness. I learnt the loneliness piece in that environment, and that was early 2000s. So I'm pleased to hear you refer to it, the impact of the pandemic. That's lovely to hear. Yeah, bringing a bit more of yourself, and that leading as a human that sometimes makes mistakes and does the best with what you've got at hand. And then what you're talking about is also specific communication, Corinne. You're actually saying that you're being mindful of what happened, and also explaining your decision making and where you're at with it, which gives context. And I love how this word context is in our everyday so much these days because of AI and context setting. And I wonder if it's also improving our communication, because we're like, oh, we've got to provide context to others in real life, not just the agents.
Totally.
And tell me, what drives you these days with this lovely being able to be around more green and more green initiatives? What are you looking forward to seeing in the world? I bet you were pretty clear on what you were driving towards when you were doing the financial work. So tell me more about day to day now.
I think part of it is just seeing that the magic of what nature has to offer, which is what I get a lot of my energy from at the moment. And so really getting out there amongst it and seeing the beautiful things. What's
an example? Can I interrupt? Can you tell me some examples?
Well, I think in the last year, the biggest joy I've had has been chasing the Aurora Australis and watching just what a magical phenomenon that is. I have an app on my phone and I check it in the middle of the night, and I check, and then driving out in the middle of nowhere, and you can kind of see something in the sky, but then you lift up the camera and all the colours come through, and it's really quite special. So I think it's things like that, taking the time to pause, listen, look, and there's so much of it around. And as I've had the great opportunity of travelling across Victoria, I look at how diverse Victoria is, and how humans have shaped the landscape for so long, whether it's First Nations people or even the gold rush when I go up to, some of the country in the high country where you can see the rivers have been shaped, and, all the topsoil is no longer there, and all of that, just noticing the little things and having, I think, the luxury of time to watch that is I think pretty special.
Yeah, wow. And have you seen the the Northern Lights, or seen them in other?
No, I'm dying to.
I'm
going to go and see, hopefully, a solar eclipse in the Arctic this year.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh, Corinne.
I have become a total nature chaser. I always was, but it's taken a whole new level of nature chasing.
Oh, my gosh. I love to learn this about you. If something in this conversation lit you up, there's a signal in that. If you want help tuning your own signal into a clear next move, start with a 3-minute signal check-in at naturalgenius.com.au. And if you want focused support, book a signal lab and we'll work through it together. Now back to the Natural Genius. Having not seen each other for a while, I was sort of, you know how you get like little breadcrumbs of friends across the internet from time to time. And I did pick up on this nature piece, and it sort of made me recall it when we first got to know each other through Do Lectures and seeing you at Payne's Hut. But I think being able to experience the land is so very special. And as you're talking about picking up your camera to see even more into another dimension, and I bet you would have learnt a lot more about Indigenous knowledge in different parts of Victoria as well, Corinne.
Totally. And I think that's been a real joy, because I'd worked quite a lot on financial inclusion for First Nations people in my work previously, but to now learn about country and to hear about the songlines and the stories, and to compare it also, because Victoria's colonial history was pretty brutal. So some of the stories we've lost in Victoria, but to piece the ones we have. But as you go to some of the other states where those cultures are probably less damaged, you get these really, really interesting stories and insights. And sometimes just, you look up at the stars and you go, this is the sky that we've all seen for so many years. There's something quite grounding about that. So I feel really honoured to hear those stories, to meet those elders. And probably my shout out would be to anyone who hasn't been to Budj, which is in Western Victoria near Hamilton, which are these really, really interesting rock eel catching mechanisms, so structures that are 6,000 years old. And there's just this amazing World Heritage site in our backyard that many Victorians haven't seen. And it's absolutely amazing to go and experience, hear the stories, and to hear the First Nations people today talking about how their families relate to this land.
Corinne, tell me more. Amongst all the places that you've seen in Victoria, that one has touched you a lot. Tell me more.
I think what I did, and they've got this great tour operating out of that area, and it just talks about the stories, but also around the role of eels in First Nations histories and culture. And so you hear about the life cycle of the eels, and you get a bit of biology, but you also then hear around how important it was in the trade as part of food for many, many years. So get out there, and there's this fantastic little cafe that's run by First Nations business in the middle of it, and it's great.
Oh, how
it's a must do. I thought it was so good. I went 3 times.
Oh, I love learning about this. Do you know, it's amazing going to certain sites. I was talking to Tim Buzzer recently about the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. And I loved going there years ago because it actually felt like I was in the middle of East and West. Like I could kind of feel a little bit of the Silk Road. I could feel a little bit of the trade by going into that palace and seeing like the Fabergé egg, and then the Chinese gifts to the prince, and then the European gifts. And I think it was like Muhammad's footprint or something. So there was like, and then also next door, the Hagia Sophia and all the different religions that had taken on that site over the years. And then also Do Lectures is coming up because the two of us in part met through that. I remember hearing that there were part of the organising around that is we had difficulties finding an elder to be able to do the Welcome to Country because they had passed in that area. And, some of the history you're referring to as to the colonialisation. And then through the processes of us having that experience, all of us coming together for that, and then the healing of the land that apparently happened, and then the passing on of Welcome to Country to Graham Payne, who was the venue co-founder through that experience. It's really lovely to see humans build in conjunction with the land.
Totally. And there's so much to learn from that, I think. And again, we have to take the time to think it through, digest the history, because it's pretty confronting. But there's a level of resilience because these stories have remained and thrive still after these, quite traumatic colonial periods.
I want to circle back to talking about bringing your whole self to work. I appreciate what you just said too, by the way. I did listen. I feel like for you, again, we don't know each other that well, but we've got such a care and love for each other, I think. I feel like family has helped to ground and strengthen who you are as a leader. Tell me more.
Yeah, I think family's always been really important for me. And so I grew up as a child of two migrants, European migrants. And so we speak French at home. And we've always been quite a tight family because a lot of, people were in Europe, they weren't here. So my parents kind of formed their own life and existence, and it created quite a smaller nuclear but really strong family unit, and it's been a strength for, I think, my entire life, and now is also part of who I am and how I spend my time. I spend a lot of time with family, so bringing up my son in that is also really important, and around the role of supporting and nurturing and caring, but also respect and listening and learning from others.
Oh, you've said that so succinctly. There's a lot in those succinct words, Corinne. That is so beautiful to hear. I have a very dear friend who's their three generations are all very close, and they holiday on weekends together, and it's just such a unit. And there's the matriarch and the patriarch, and I think it's lovely to observe that strength that they all get and that delight. They don't necessarily need too many other friends around because they've got this beautiful unit that walks together.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty blessed with that. It does require a lot of time and nurture, and I think, I spend a lot of time doing that.
Yeah, and do you think that what comes to mind as you just said that was that impact on the teams that you grow, Corinne? I wonder if you might take some of those essences to the workplace.
I think to a certain degree, I think it's part of learning, working with people and valuing people, and respecting people, and that we're all quite different but also can work well together. But I think one of the biggest things that I thank the pandemic for is that because of this blending of family and work in a way, it probably overblended for a little while, but it's come back that things such as flexible working has become much more normalised. And I think for a long period, if you had a family and you were working full time, you kind of had to run the two in parallel, and we don't as humans run them in parallel. So to be able to say, hey, I've got to take my kids swimming, that doesn't mean I can't do my job. Being able to have a much more open conversation, I think that progressed workplace culture by about 10 years. Because we were able to blend a bit more. Now, it doesn't work for everybody, but as we have caring duties, both whether it's from young people or older people, that having that greater flexibility allows you to still perform whilst, you know, being able to support the other parts of your life without feeling like you're compromising any one piece. And I think that's part of the difficulty. And I don't think we would have got to where we are now had we not had the pandemic. The pandemic kind of blew it all up a bit. And as with any system of change, that's not usually a really good experience at the time. But what I see coming out of it is something that is probably more human than what we had before.
Yeah, well said. I think if different organisations can continue those aspects rather than retracting to pre-pandemic restrictions, I think being able to take what works. And tell me, Corinne.
Saying that, I also am an absolute fan of heading back into the office, which has been this contentious discussion. And that's because the people I've seen suffer the most from working entirely remotely is young people coming into their career, because that tea room conversation is really important, because you learn so much by watching or by listening. And when you're at home and just working on a screen, some of us, like myself, I'm actually okay doing that, but I can see the younger people really struggle with it because they're not exposed to a whole lot of other things. So we've been really conscious that I want to create a workplace where people want to go to the office because they want to interact with their colleagues, but that the power of those interactions can't be underestimated. So it doesn't mean you can't have flexibility, but we do need to come together. As humans, we are better when we come together, and ideas are, I think, of better quality when we join together. So creating the space to do that is really, really important, particularly as we've got to make sure the next generation has the skills to take on what is an increasingly complex world.
Corinne, you speak to my heart, and I think you talked about listening and watching in the workplace, and it's sensing and the energies that you create around each other as well. And so how are you doing that successfully?
I think I'm really lucky in that people who work in conservation tend to they love what they do, and they tend to
hang out and have a cuppa together.
So I think
it's all about the tea.
I've got a natural bias there that they're likely to come together. But
lead the rest of the world, Corinne, lead them.
But I think we just need to create a place that people want to come in, and to explain why. You know, it's not because I'm trying to check whether you're coming in. It's because there's some magic that happens when you do interact. And some of the things we've thought about is even the location of the office and making sure it's easy to access by public transport in the head office from every direction in Melbourne, so that doesn't become necessarily a burden for coming in.
And where have you chosen, Corinne?
We're in Collins Street, but just around the corner from Flinders Street. So it's really easy to get to. But that has been one of our considerations, because if you put it in the east or in the north or in the west, you're disadvantaging a group. And my sense is there's something about bringing us together. We also have offices regionally, but again, we know I want people to go there so that they can hang out with their colleagues, share some ideas, and go back out in the field.
And do you find people from the office there in town do they work remotely sometimes from the regional offices as well?
Yeah.
Just because they can, like they don't necessarily need to for their work, but they do.
Yeah.
Oh, how fun.
And that again was one of those, I think, barriers that evolved through the pandemic, where particularly in Victoria, where Melbourne became quite separated from the regions just due to the level of potential risk of transmission. There was, there's always a barrier between head office and region. I think that's a natural business tension. But if you add an additional barrier to it, that creates these I think chasms if we are not careful. So we've really focused on, and I've put it in the KPIs of the exec, you need to get out there, you need to understand the team on ground, you need to understand the business that's happening out there. And so you don't need to have a meeting specifically, but just make sure you understand what we do.
How amazing. I want to be mindful of your time. Is there anything we haven't discussed? I mean, it's just been the most joyful conversation. Yes. It kind of feels like so many of these conversations, Corinne, feel like a part A. Like I kind of just want to run a whole series. But tell me with what we've discussed, is there anything that we haven't that you'd like to pass on? Because I love these episodes because it gives people a platform, and it also gives you a chance to pass on things that have worked. And someone said the other day that it's great to be able to bring in sensing and energy and intuition into just the everyday conversation. And I think you and I both know that, you just mentioned the word magic before. You and I both know this is like, sometimes I often say with strategy, it's business plans and other things I've done in the past, more and more these days, I'm like, oh, actually there was more that came into that. It wasn't just that I'd studied engineering and I'd worked in management consulting. Like there was other, I don't know, natural abilities that came through for some of those to be successful.
I totally agree. And I think the other piece, and a lesson I learnt quite hard at the time, is a great idea and has its right time. You can have a good idea, and if it isn't presented at the right time, it can fall flat on its face. So it's not only the quality of the idea or the strategy, it's the timing. And timing you don't always have control on. So if the timing's not right, you just hold on to it potentially to see if you can line up the stars, because that was a tough one to learn, because I had a great idea and it fell flat on its face and I had that whole business failure moment. But there was that huge lesson of saying that's only half the piece. The other piece is watch that timing and understanding that external environment, and when it's right is absolutely critical, and it's that other half of it. And that's where I often see great strategies, but if you haven't read the right tea leaves, they can go nowhere.
And Corinne, that's beyond stakeholder management, isn't it, done well? Yep. So it's like you can do all the stakeholder management that you like and make sure that each individual knows what's coming and what the idea is. But at the end of the day, if the timing's not right, then it won't come to be.
Totally. And, I had a great idea. It was all ready to go, and then we had a pandemic. Well, you couldn't have foreseen that, and then everyone locks down, and suddenly all of those revenue streams we'd anticipated disappeared. But that's just one of the things you've got to work with and be open to. So it's really important to also understand your external landscape. To see, because there's only so much you can control within an organisation. Some of it is really resting with the gods.
And Corinne, well done, because that would have strengthened you as a leader, what you went through at the start. It was right. By the sounds of things, yeah.
Yep. It was one of those, you often talk about the failures you have to have are the ones you learn from, and it was a tough one to learn from. And I think with the reflection now, it's I got lots out of it, and I have no regrets. But at the time, it felt awful.
Brutal. And I chatted with someone in the last few months, and he was saying that his focus is to be able to take on bigger challenges. And so he was talking about with each new failure or new success or new experience that he has, life can give him bigger challenges because he's taking on more and more. And so his drive in life was to be able to take on these bigger challenges. And so I think that sometimes when you're doing your best and you're sensing into what you need to do next, you do get bigger challenges and you do get failures and you do get successes, and it's being able to grow through them.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's lots still to do in this world, both, I think, socially and environmentally to make it a better place. And, you know, you've just got to keep focused on building a better world for the future.
And Corinne, is there any shout out or any call out that you'd make around things that you see, anything that you'd like to see happen in the world or you'd like to see people work on?
I'd like them to stop warring, but I think that's a bit too optimistic.
Oh God, I just keep on thinking of the overview effect. You know, they say the astronauts leave as scientists and come back as philosophers once they've seen the blue planet, and they think, why on earth would we be warring?
That's right. And I think that's partly what I think is like why, you know, we have this extraordinary planet and we are part of it. We're not separate, and we need to spend more time making sure it's going to be okay. You know, we've got a really ambitious global goal of protecting 30% of land and water by 2030. We've got a long way to go, and that should be our primary focus, because the things that we are looking after are just extraordinary.
Oh, Corinne, you are beautiful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been lovely to chat with you.
Thanks for listening to the Natural Genius podcast. Please share this with anyone who came to mind and visit us at naturalgenius.com.au. Thanks so much.